It did not arrive with an announcement. No broadcast, no scientific bulletin, no calendar date circled in red. The frequency shift of 2026 arrived through your body, through symptoms that started appearing weeks or months ago and do not match any diagnosis, any medication side effect, any stress profile you can identify. You went to the doctor. The tests came back normal. You adjusted your routine. The symptoms persisted. You told yourself it was a phase. The phase did not end. And somewhere in the middle of that confusion, a suspicion formed, quiet, insistent, almost beneath language, that what you are experiencing is not a malfunction, that your body is responding to something your mind has not yet named. In every tradition that tracked planetary cycles, Hindu, Egyptian, Hermetic, Hopi, the moments of collective frequency transition were never silent. They produced markers, physical disruptions, emotional accelerations, perceptual shifts that the uninitiated mistook for illness and the prepared recognized as signal. The Vedic tradition called these transition symptoms the body catching up to the soul's new address. Nay, the Hermetic tradition mapped them to the law of vibration. When the base frequency of the environment shifts, every system calibrated to the old frequency experiences turbulence before settling into the new one. And the turbulence is not random. It follows a pattern that is remarkably consistent across traditions, across centuries, across continents. Before we go deeper into this, if this kind of knowledge speaks to you, subscribe to the channel. This is where we keep building on this work together. Have you noticed that the disruptions began before you found this content? That the sleep changes, the emotional intensity, the shifts in appetite and social energy, all of them appeared before you had any framework to put them in? That sequence is the defining fingerprint of a genuine transition. A manufactured experience begins with the idea and produces the symptom. Someone reads about ascension symptoms and begins feeling them. A genuine shift follows the opposite direction. It begins with the symptom and leaves you searching for the idea that explains it. You did not decide to experience these things. They arrived in your system uninvited, and you are now looking for the map that makes them intelligible. The map exists. It has existed for thousands of years. Tonight, you are going to read it. The medical model will offer you labels: anxiety, hormonal fluctuations, circadian disruption, stress. And in individual cases, every one of those labels may be accurate. But the medical model evaluates symptoms in isolation. It does not ask the question that the ancient traditions always asked first. Are these symptoms appearing in a cluster? Are they arriving simultaneously across multiple domains: sleep, emotion, relationships, diet, perception, physical sensation? Because when they appear together, when 4 or 5 or all 7 markers activate in the same person during the same window, the pattern exceeds what any single medical diagnosis can account for. The traditions that tracked frequency shifts knew this. The symptoms are not the problem. The pattern they form is the message. 7 signs. Each one, in isolation, has an ordinary explanation. Sleep disruption has documented causes. Emotional sensitivity has triggers. Dietary changes happen. Relationships evolve. But when multiple signs from unrelated domains, sleep, emotion, diet, social connection, perception, physical sensation, converge in the same person during the same period, without a single unifying medical cause that accounts for all of them simultaneously, the probability that you are observing coincidence drops below the threshold where a reasonable mind can maintain the coincidence hypothesis. And the probability that you are observing what the ancient traditions described as the symptom profile of a collective frequency transition rises to the level where ignoring it requires significantly more effort than examining it closely. The concept of collective frequency shifts is not modern speculation. The Hindu mapping of cosmic cycles, the yugas, describes time in ages of varying density. Satya Yuga is the age of highest frequency, maximum coherence, closest alignment with source consciousness. Kali Yuga is the age of maximum density, maximum discord, maximum distance from that alignment. The current age, Kali Yuga, which the tradition dates from approximately 3102 BCE, represents the densest point in the cycle. And every tradition that tracked this cycle described what happens at the boundary between ages. The existing frequency accelerates before the new one stabilizes. The symptoms come first. The clarity comes after. Picture what is measurable. The Schumann resonance, Earth's electromagnetic heartbeat, predicted mathematically by physicist Winfried Otto Schumann in 1952 and confirmed through measurements in the early 1960s at approximately 7.83 Hz. For decades, this base frequency was remarkably stable, a reliable electromagnetic foundation for every biological system on the planet. In recent years, monitoring stations across multiple countries have documented elevated spikes in amplitude, measurable increases in the intensity of Earth's electromagnetic pulse. The scientific explanation is changes in global lightning distribution and ionospheric conditions. The hermetic explanation is simpler. The planet's base vibration is in motion, and when the base vibration of the environment shifts, every organism calibrated to that base frequency responds. What does that response look like in the human body? A 2022 double-blind randomized study published in Nature and Science of Sleep found that exposure to 7.83 Hz electromagnetic fields significantly improved sleep quality in chronic insomniacs compared to placebo. The body is not merely present in this electromagnetic field, it is calibrated to it. The HeartMath Institute has documented that human heart rhythm variability synchronizes with Schumann resonance frequencies and geomagnetic field line resonances. The heart literally entrains to the electromagnetic pulse of the planet. When that pulse shifts, the body's most fundamental rhythms, sleep, heartbeat, emotional regulation, neural processing, are affected. Not eventually, immediately. The body responds to the electromagnetic environment the way a tuning fork responds to sound. The Hermetic tradition captured this principle in a single axiom that has survived for centuries. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. That statement, attributed to the body of Hermetic teaching formalized in the Kybalion, is not mystical poetry. It is an operational description of reality at its most fundamental level. And the corollary the tradition draws is this. When the vibration of the environment changes, every entity within that environment must either recalibrate to the new frequency or experience increasing dissonance with the world it inhabits. The dissonance manifests as symptoms. The recalibration manifests as the same symptoms followed by clarity. The difference between suffering a frequency shift and navigating one is whether you recognize what is happening while it is happening. The Hopi tradition describes the transition between world ages, from the current fourth world to the emerging fifth world, not as a single catastrophic event, but as a gradual intensification of signals that the prepared can read and the unprepared will misinterpret as random chaos. The fifth world, in Hopi teaching, is characterized by harmony, regeneration, and reconnection with earth and spirit. But the transition period that precedes it produces destabilization in every system, personal, social, environmental, as the structures of the old age lose coherence and the patterns of the new age begin to crystallize. The signs you are about to examine are the evidence of that transition happening, not in the abstract, in your nervous system. Tonight, you have been experiencing the response before you had language for it, before anyone told you what to call it, before this content reached your screen. The disruptions in your sleep, your relationships, your emotions, your body, they did not begin with an idea. They began with a sensation that had no name. And you have been carrying that sensation for weeks or months, looking for the framework that makes it intelligible. The 7 signs are that framework. They are the map of what your body has been navigating without your conscious direction. If you recognize 3 or more of them, you are not reading about a theory. You are living inside one. And the theory is older than any civilization currently on the planet. Write in the comments today's date and complete the sentence, I recognize the shift. Not as speculation, as acknowledgement of what your body has already been telling you. The first sign, your sleep architecture has changed, and the change does not yield to the usual corrections. You are waking between 2 and 4 in the morning, not from nightmares, not from the familiar pressure of anxiety, from an alertness that arrives uninvited, eyes open, mind sharp, body fatigued, but consciousness clear. You lie in the dark and feel awake in a way that does not match the hour, and the daytime fatigue you carry afterward does not correspond to the amount of sleep you got. The hours were sufficient, the rest was not. Something inside the system is running an operation that sleep alone cannot complete, and it chooses the quietest hours of the night to do its work. In the Hermetic tradition, the hours between 2 and 4 in the morning were identified as the window, when the boundary between conscious and subconscious mind reaches its lowest point, the thin hours. Chinese traditional medicine maps this window to the liver meridian, the organ system governing transformation and processing at the deepest physiological level. The Vedic tradition names this period Brahma Muhurta, the Creator's hour, and considers it the most potent window for spiritual practice precisely because the mind's ordinary defenses are at their minimum. 3 independent medical and spiritual traditions, same 2-hour window, same observation. This is when the system is most receptive to information that operates below the level of waking consciousness. Why does the body wake you during a frequency shift? Because the recalibration cannot run while the conscious mind is operating its daytime programs. The processing bandwidth that sleep normally dedicates to memory consolidation and cellular repair gets redistributed when the electromagnetic environment shifts. Sleep becomes lighter, more interrupted, not because something is wrong, but because the system needs brief windows of conscious participation to complete the upgrade. Not every 2-4 a.m. awakening is this, but the specific pattern, waking with unusual mental clarity during that window, combined with daytime fatigue that does not match sleep duration, is the pattern that every tradition flagged as the marker of active recalibration. Think of your body as a receiver that has been tuned to a single station for years. The signal was stable. Reception was clear. Sleep operated within that established pattern without interruption. When the base frequency of the electromagnetic environment begins to shift, the receiver loses its lock on the old signal before it fully acquires the new one. The sleep disruption is the gap between stations, the period of scanning, not static, transition. And the body chooses the 2-4 a.m. window for this scanning because that is when the system's noise-to-signal ratio is lowest. You are waking up because your receiver is searching for the new frequency, and it is finding it in increments. The second sign operates in a domain that no clock can measure and no calendar can correct. Your perception of time has fractured, and the fracture does not respond to rest, routine, or scheduling adjustments. Hours pass in what feels like minutes. Weeks carry the emotional density of months. A single Tuesday afternoon can hold more weight, more significance, more processing demand than an entire previous season. And the distortion runs in both directions simultaneously. Time feels compressed and expanded at once, as though the fundamental rhythm your life has always operated within has shifted to a tempo your mind cannot fully synchronize with. You finish a workday and the clock says 8 hours passed. Your experience says 3 or 12. The clock says one thing, your experience says another, and the gap between them is widening. The Hermetic law of rhythm describes all phenomena as moving in cycles, outward and inward, rising and falling, expansion and contraction. When the base frequency governing those cycles shifts, the perceived speed of the rhythm changes with it. The Hindu tradition maps this precisely to the yuga transitions. As collective consciousness approaches a frequency threshold, the subjective experience of time compresses. Processes that required years begin completing in months. Decisions that used to develop over weeks crystallize in days. The acceleration you feel is not imaginary. It is how human consciousness registers the compression of cycles as a frequency boundary approaches, and the simultaneous sense of expansion of single days carrying enormous weight is the other side of the same coin. More information per unit of time means each unit carries greater density. Clock time has not changed. 24 hours remain 24 hours. But perception, in a universe whose fundamental nature is electromagnetic and informational, is not secondary. It is primary. Research on time perception demonstrates that the brain's sense of duration is influenced by 3 variables: attention density, emotional intensity, and the rate of novel information processing. During a frequency shift, all 3 increase simultaneously. More novel information arriving per unit of time, higher emotional processing demands, greater call on attention. The result is exactly what you have been experiencing, a time distortion that no schedule adjustment can correct, because the distortion is not in the clock. It is in the frequency at which your consciousness is processing the clock. If you have been checking the clock more frequently than usual, if you have been saying, "How is it already 5 o'clock?" or "This week felt like a month," with increasing regularity, you are registering the second sign. The time distortion is not a quirk of your schedule. It is a perceptual signature of a frequency environment that is accelerating beyond the rhythm your consciousness was calibrated to process, and it will not resolve by rearranging your calendar. It resolves when the recalibration completes and your perception adjusts to the new tempo. Until then, the distortion is the signal, not the problem. The third sign arrives in your relationships, and it arrives without the drama you would expect. People are leaving your life, not through conflict, not through betrayal or identifiable injury, through a quiet, almost imperceptible drift that neither side fully comprehends. Conversations that used to flow without effort now feel performative. Time spent with certain people drains you in ways it simply never did before. The impulse to withdraw from specific relationships is not antisocial. It is not a general retreat from connection. It is selective, precise, almost surgical, targeting specific connections while leaving others not only untouched, but actively deepened. Notice who has stepped back in the last 3 to 6 months. Not the departures that arrived through confrontation, the ones that came as silence. The friend you stopped reaching out to without making any conscious decision to stop. The family gathering that began feeling like a performance, a costume you put on at the door and take off in the car afterward. The colleague whose company you once tolerated without effort but now find draining in a way you cannot articulate. This is not you becoming cold or antisocial. This is your system recalibrating to a different operating frequency, and connections that were coherent at the previous frequency are losing their lock, the way a radio loses a station as you drive beyond its transmission range. No one committed a fault. No one changed in a way that requires blame. The frequencies are simply no longer aligned, and the body registers the mismatch before the mind can name it. Why do frequency shifts affect relationships before almost anything else? Because human connection operates through electromagnetic entrainment. The HeartMath Institute has documented that the heart generates an electromagnetic field extending several feet beyond the body, and that two people in sustained proximity entrain their heart rhythms to each other. When your fundamental frequency shifts, the entrainment patterns that held your existing relationships in coherence change. Some relationships recalibrate naturally and deepen, others lose lock entirely. The dissolution you are experiencing is not personal, it is electromagnetic, and the exhaustion that comes from forcing yourself to maintain connections that have lost resonance is the friction of incompatible frequencies being held in artificial proximity. Your system spending energy to maintain a signal that no longer serves either party. Picture two tuning forks vibrating at the same frequency. Place them near each other and resonance occurs. Each amplifies the other's vibration, each strengthens the other's output. Now retune one fork to a different frequency. The resonance stops. Not because of conflict, not because of a disagreement about anything, because the frequencies no longer match. The sympathetic vibration that sustained the connection ceases to operate the moment the frequencies diverge. The people who remain in your life through this transition, the ones whose presence does not drain you, whose conversation still flows, whose company feels nourishing rather than performative, are the ones whose frequency is either shifting in parallel with yours or is already operating at the level you are calibrating toward. Pay close attention to who stays. They are not just friends or family who happen to remain. They are your frequency markers, living evidence of where you are going. The fourth sign shows up at the most physical level available, what your body will and will not accept. Foods you have consumed for years without thought suddenly produce resistance. Bloating, heaviness, aversion, nausea, reactions to substances your system previously processed without complaint. Caffeine hits harder and recovers slower. Alcohol produces consequences disproportionate to the quantity consumed. Processed foods that were invisible to your digestion now announce themselves immediately. This shift in tolerance is not an allergy developing. It is not simply a sudden sensitivity without precedent. It is a threshold recalibrating, and it operates with a specificity and timing that dietary changes alone do not explain. The ancient purification traditions were not arbitrary deprivation. The Egyptian priests fasted before entering the inner chambers of the temples at Memphis and Luxor. The Pythagorean school imposed strict dietary codes as a prerequisite for receiving the deeper teachings. Pythagoras himself reportedly required years of dietary discipline before advanced students could access the inner circle. The Buddhist tradition of mindful eating was a consciousness practice, not a health regimen. The Vedic practice of upavasa, sitting near the divine through abstention from certain foods, was an explicit frequency practice. In every case, the principle was identical. Certain substances lower the rate at which the body vibrates. During periods of frequency elevation, the body begins rejecting those substances automatically, before the mind decides to. Sugar in quantities your body previously handled without reaction. Caffeine beyond a moderate threshold that has quietly lowered itself without your permission. Processed food that your system used to metabolize invisibly. Alcohol in amounts that would not have registered 6 months ago. Heavy meals consumed late at night. Each carries a specific energetic density that your body, during a frequency shift, communicates about in the most direct language available to it. Physical discomfort, not punishment, not sudden illness, feedback. The body is saying in the only language it has, this substance is no longer compatible with the frequency I am calibrating toward. Not every new food sensitivity is a sign of frequency transition. But when multiple intolerances or aversions appear simultaneously, without a diagnosable medical trigger that accounts for all of them, and when they coincide with the other signs on this list, the pattern is speaking at a volume that individual symptoms alone cannot reach. The fifth sign contradicts the model of emotional health most people carry. You are experiencing emotions at intensities that surprise you, sadness that arrives without provocation, joy that spikes disproportionately to its cause, anger that surfaces without a clear target, tears in response to beauty or kindness or music that you would have processed silently before. The conventional framework labels this emotional instability. But instability implies degradation. What you are experiencing is the opposite, an increase in sensitivity that comes paired with a feature the instability model cannot account for: rapid recovery. The emotions arrive at high intensity and clear within minutes once they are fully felt. They do not settle into extended states of depression or anxiety. They discharge. The distinction between emotional instability and frequency-based sensitivity is recovery time. Instability operates on a slow cycle. The emotion arrives, persists, settles into the system, and takes hours or days to metabolize. Frequency-based sensitivity operates on a fast cycle: high intensity, rapid clearance, return to baseline. The system is not destabilizing, it is accelerating, processing emotional data at a higher throughput rate, more information per unit of time, faster discharge, shorter cycles. The intensity is a function of increased bandwidth, not decreased stability. And the rapid clearance is the evidence that the processing is completing rather than accumulating. The wave moves through, not into. The Hermetic law of rhythm applies here with precision. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. During a frequency shift, the emotional pendulum swings wider. The lows dip deeper, the highs peak higher. The oscillations become more dramatic than anything in your recent emotional history. This intensification is not dysfunction. It is the amplitude increase that always precedes stabilization at a new frequency. The same way a pendulum swings wider when it is moved to a new fulcrum before settling into its new rhythm at the new position. Your emotional system is searching for its new center. The wider swings are the transition, not the destination, and the speed at which the emotions clear is the evidence that the system is processing faster, not breaking down. If you have noticed this pattern, intense emotional waves that arrive without clear provocation and clear within minutes rather than persisting for hours, you are experiencing the fifth sign. And the fact that the clearing happens quickly is the most important datum in the entire pattern. A system that is deteriorating processes slower. A system that is upgrading processes faster. The speed of clearance is not a secondary detail. It is the single metric that separates breakdown from breakthrough in every tradition that tracked these transitions. Track the recovery time. That is where the evidence is, not the intensity of the wave, the speed at which it passes through you. If you're finding value in what we're uncovering here, take a second to like this video. That feedback is what keeps this work going. The sixth sign is the one your rational mind resists most fiercely. Synchronicities are multiplying, not in the occasional once-a-week pattern that could be dismissed as coincidence, but in clusters. Multiple meaningful coincidences per day, numbers appearing with a frequency that your probability-trained brain cannot account for. 1111, 222, 333, on clocks, receipts, license plates, timestamps. Conversations that answer the precise question you were silently holding. Information arriving through channels you did not seek at the exact moment you needed it. The density of meaningful coincidence in your daily experience has shifted from background curiosity to foreground signal. Carl Jung formalized this phenomenon in the 1950s with the term synchronicity, meaningful coincidence without causal mechanism. Jung distinguished synchronicity from random coincidence with specific criteria. It requires a significant inner state, a thought, intention, or emotional charge occurring simultaneously with a corresponding outer event that has no causal connection to the inner state. What Jung described is not pattern matching or wishful thinking. It is a condition in which the boundary between inner experience and outer event becomes more permeable, and the correspondence between thought and reality becomes visible at a frequency that exceeds statistical noise. During a frequency shift, the threshold for that permeability drops. Events that would normally fall below the detection line begin registering as unmistakable signal. The rationalist objection is confirmation bias. You are noticing patterns because you are primed to seek them. In some cases, that explanation is adequate, but confirmation bias fails to account for precision. Seeing 11:11 on a clock once is noticing. Seeing it on a clock, a receipt, and a license plate in the same hour is attention. Receiving a call from someone the moment you thought of them, not the same day but the same moment, is not bias. It is correspondence operating at a resolution that selective attention alone cannot produce. And when the precision and density of synchronistic events increases across multiple unrelated domains simultaneously, the confirmation bias model begins requiring more assumptions than the frequency model to sustain itself. The simplest explanation is not always the comfortable one. Track the content of the synchronicities, not just their occurrence. They carry specific information. The number that keeps appearing, it is not arbitrary. The person who keeps surfacing across unrelated contexts, they are not random. The phrase you keep hearing from 3 different unconnected sources in the same week, it is not background noise. These are not random signals piling up through selection bias. They are a coherent transmission that is becoming clearer as your reception bandwidth expands. The frequency shift is not only changing your internal experience, it is changing what you are able to detect, expanding the range of information your system registers as meaningful rather than discarding as noise. And that expansion of perceptual range is the 6th sign. The ancient traditions had a framework for this that modern cognitive science is only beginning to approach. The Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below, as below, so above, describes a universe in which patterns at one level are mirrored at every other level. When your frequency shifts, you begin perceiving correspondences that were always present, but were beneath your previous detection threshold. It is not that synchronicities are increasing in the external world. It is that your capacity to register them has crossed a threshold. The signals were always there. Your receiver is now operating at the bandwidth that can pick them up. And the increased density of what you are noticing is not a measure of external change. It is a measure of internal expansion. The 7th sign is the most physical and the most likely to generate medical anxiety. Ringing in the ears, not the constant uniform tinnitus caused by hearing damage, but an intermittent high-pitched tone that arrives in one ear, persists for seconds or minutes and disappears as suddenly as it came. Pressure at the crown of the head, a weight or electrical sensation that appears without headache. Tingling in the hands, along the spine, in the soles of the feet. Waves of heat that move through the body without accompanying fever. And the defining characteristic, medical evaluation finds nothing. No infection, no structural abnormality, no hormonal imbalance sufficient to account for the symptom. In the Vedic tradition, these sensations map with remarkable precision onto the chakra system. The crown pressure corresponds to activation of Sahasrara, the 7th energy center, associated with connection to consciousness beyond the individual. The ear frequencies correspond to the opening of what the tradition calls inner hearing, the capacity to perceive vibrational information beyond the audible spectrum. The spine tingling maps to the Kundalini channel, Sushumna, the central energy pathway whose activation is described as the physiological dimension of awakening. 3 independent traditions, Vedic, Hermetic, and the traditional Chinese meridian system, documented these same physical sensations as markers of frequency elevation. Identical symptom map. No communication between the sources. The medical establishment operates within a materialist framework that does not include the energetic dimension these traditions describe. When a symptom is present, subjectively significant, and medically unexplained, the default diagnosis is psychosomatic or idiopathic, of unknown origin. The traditions that mapped frequency transitions would not disagree with the diagnosis. They would expand it. The cause is not imagined. The cause is operating in a domain that the current diagnostic model does not include. When your symptom profile matches what three independent ancient systems documented as the physiological signature of frequency elevation, and when it appears alongside the other 6 signs, the absence of a medical diagnosis is not the absence of a cause. It is the presence of a cause your doctor's framework was not designed to detect. Ground pressure, ear frequencies that arrive and leave without pattern, spine activation, heat waves without fever, tingling at the extremities. These are the body's reports from the interface between the electromagnetic field you have been calibrated to and the one you are calibrating toward. The same way your skin registers the temperature change when you step from shade into direct sunlight, your nervous system registers the frequency change when the electromagnetic environment shifts. The sensations are real. The body is responding to something measurable, and the 7 signs taken together are the complete symptom profile of a biological system in active frequency recalibration. Recognizing the signs is the first step. Navigating them is the work. Every tradition that documented these markers also preserved a response protocol. Not to stop the transition, but to cooperate with it so that the recalibration completes with minimum friction, because the suffering you have been experiencing is not produced by the shift itself. It is produced by the friction between the shift and your system's attempt to hold on to the old calibration. The resistance generates the pain. The alignment resolves it, and the protocols are simpler than you would expect, because the shift is doing the heavy work. Your task is to stop interfering with it. The integration protocol operates on a single principle, preserved across every tradition that mapped frequency transitions. Cooperate, do not resist. Suppressing the symptoms, medicating the sleep disruption, numbing the emotional sensitivity with distraction, forcing depleted relationships through willpower, overriding dietary signals with habit, does not slow the shift. It increases the friction. Every additional unit of resistance produces an additional unit of discomfort. The Hermetic tradition taught this as a corollary of the law of vibration. Attempting to hold a system at a frequency it is transitioning away from produces the maximum possible turbulence. Releasing the hold produces the minimum. If you have been experiencing these signs and want the complete integration protocol, the daily practices designed specifically for this transition window, I left something for you in the first pinned comment. It is for those who are ready to move from recognition to alignment. What does practical cooperation look like? 3 domains: sleep, energy, and relationships. When the body wakes you at 2 to 4 a.m., stop fighting it. Use the window. The traditions that mapped this period identified it as the highest receptivity state of consciousness available in the 24-hour cycle. 5 minutes of quiet, focused presence during that window, holding your intention, observing your inner state without narrating it, breathing deliberately, produces more effect than hours of practice during the day. Not because of mysticism, because the nervous system is in its most permeable state during that period, and the frequency signal your body is scanning for is strongest when the conscious mind's usual noise is at its lowest. Think of the 2-4 a.m. awakening as a door the system is opening, not a malfunction it needs repair. The body is waking you at the moment when the current is most active because the recalibration requires brief windows of conscious participation. A navigator does not sleep through the moment the current changes direction. 5 minutes is sufficient. Presence without analysis. Attention without narrative. Then return to sleep. The body will regulate the timing and duration as the recalibration progresses. What prolongs the disruption is the anxiety about the disruption, the second-order resistance that doubles the friction. The energy oscillations, days of deep fatigue followed by surges of clarity and creative force, follow the hermetic law of rhythm precisely. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. During a frequency transition, the rhythm's amplitude increases before it stabilizes at the new level. Fatigue swings deeper, energy surges higher. The mistake is to label the fatigue days as regression and the energy days as progress. Both are phases of the same oscillation. The fatigue is integration, the system consolidating what was recalibrated during the active phase. Pushing through an integration day is like opening the oven while the bread is rising. It interrupts the exact process it exists to complete. For the emotional sensitivity, the high-intensity rapid clearance pattern, the protocol is counterintuitive and ancient. Feel it completely without building a story around it. The emotions surfacing during a frequency shift are not problems requiring analysis. They are accumulated data moving through an accelerated processing cycle. Attaching narrative to the emotion, asking why, connecting it to a cause, constructing a story, slows the processing. Feeling the wave without narrating it, letting the sadness arrive, crest and pass, completes the discharge cycle in minutes instead of hours. Every contemplative tradition across every culture teaches this same principle. The emotion is not the obstacle. The story about the emotion is the obstacle. The relationships that are dissolving require a different form of honesty, the willingness to stop overriding what your system is clearly communicating. Forcing proximity when frequencies no longer match produces the exact drainage you have been feeling. The protocol is not dramatic departure, it is the quiet cessation of forced maintenance. Give space where the resonance has faded. Deepen connection where it remains or has intensified. The sorting will complete on its own timeline if you stop overriding the body's frequency data with the mind's sense of obligation. The people who remain after the sorting are not just the ones who stayed. They are the ones whose frequency is coherent with the one you are becoming. The physical sensations, crown pressure, ear tones, spine activation, hand tingling, require the simplest protocol of all, neutral acknowledgement. Not fear, not excitement, not interpretation. When the crown pressure arrives, place your awareness gently on the location for 30 seconds and observe without assigning meaning. When the ear frequency appears, listen to it without deciding what it signifies. The acknowledgement is the cooperation. The sensation is the body's report from the frequency boundary, the interface between the electromagnetic environment you were calibrated to and the one you are calibrating toward. Responding with anxiety amplifies the signal into discomfort. Responding with excitement creates expectation that distorts the recalibration. Neutral observation, this is happening, I notice it, I allow it, is the response that produces the minimum friction and the fastest stabilization. The dietary shifts require a similar quality of cooperation. Listen to what the body is rejecting and honor the feedback without overriding it with habit. When sugar produces heaviness that was not there before, the response is not to push through. It is to reduce. When alcohol produces disproportionate consequences, the response is not willpower. It is acknowledgement that the body's tolerance threshold has shifted. The ancient purification traditions did not frame dietary changes as deprivation. They framed them as alignment. the body moving toward the fuel that is compatible with the frequency it is entering. You are not losing the ability to eat what you used to eat. You are gaining the sensitivity to feel the mismatch that was always present but fell below your previous detection threshold. In the Hindu framework of the yugas, the period between ages is not a single event, but a gradual transition during which the markers of the old age intensify even as the markers of the new age begin to appear. The Bhagavata Purana describes the end of Kali Yuga as a period when existing structures, economic, social, relational, destabilize. But for the individuals whose systems are already calibrating to the incoming frequency, the destabilization is not experienced as collapse. It is experienced as clearing. Old structures losing coherence is the same event viewed from two perspectives. Those calibrated to the old frequency perceive breakdown. Those calibrated to the new frequency perceive the space opening for what comes next. The 7 signs are not symptoms of breakdown. They are evidence that your system is preparing for what comes next. Count how many you recognized, not how many you want to resonate with, not how many you hope apply to you, because the framework is compelling, how many your body has actually been reporting before tonight, before this content, before you had language for any of it. Sleep disruption in the 2 to 4 a.m. window, time perception fracturing in both directions, quiet relationship dissolution without clear cause, new dietary intolerances or substance rejections, emotional intensity with rapid clearance, synchronicity density increasing beyond dismissible levels, physical sensations that medical evaluation cannot explain. The traditions that mapped these signs did not require all 7. They required a minimum threshold, typically 3. If you carry 3 or more, the shift is not something you are considering. It is something your nervous system has already entered. You are recalibrating, right now, in this body, in this window. The mainstream narrative will continue offering explanations that fit the existing model. Stress, hormones, coincidence, seasonal adjustment, aging. And each of those explanations will contain partial truth. They describe the mechanism through which the shift expresses, but they do not describe the pattern. 7 symptoms from 7 unrelated domains appearing simultaneously in the same person during the same temporal window is not a medical profile. It is a frequency signature. And the traditions that tracked these signatures across millennia did not prescribe medication. They prescribed alignment, because they understood that what is occurring is not a breakdown in the system. It is an upgrade that the system is designed to execute. The shift did not request your participation. It did not schedule a consultation or wait for your calendar to clear. It began the way every major transition in every tradition has always begun. Through the body first, through perception second, through conceptual understanding last. You are in the second phase. The body has been reporting for weeks or months through sleep disruption, dietary rejection, physical sensations, emotional surges. Your perception has been registering the evidence. Time distortion, synchronicity density, the quiet dissolution of relationships that no longer resonate. Your conceptual understanding is the last faculty to arrive at the recognition, and the 7 signs are the evidence trail that connects what you have been feeling to what is actually happening, not in an abstract future, not as theoretical possibility, but now, in this body, in this nervous system, in this exact window of this exact year. The traditions that map these transitions across millennia all preserve the same observation about the sequence of recognition. The body knows first, the heart knows second, and the mind knows last. The mind's arrival is what you are experiencing right now, the moment where the conceptual framework catches up to what the body and the heart have been processing for months. This is not the beginning of the shift. It is the beginning of your conscious participation in a shift that was already underway. And conscious participation is what transforms the experience from confusion into navigation, from symptoms you cannot explain into signals you can read. Imagine standing in a river that has been flowing at a familiar pace for as long as you can remember. Over the last several months, the current has been accelerating, gradually enough to question, firmly enough to feel. The water moves faster. The footing is less stable. Positions you held comfortably for years require constant effort to maintain. The 7 signs are your body's way of communicating. The current has changed. The old standing positions are becoming untenable, not because you are weaker, but because the river is faster. The wisdom every tradition preserved for this moment is identical. Do not grip the rocks. Release. Turn downstream. The new current is not carrying you toward danger. It is carrying you toward the operating frequency your system was built for. The one the old current was too slow to reach. 7 signs. 1 shift. Already in your system. Your sleep knows it before your mind does. Your emotions are processing it faster than your thoughts can track. Your relationships are reorganizing around it, whether you give permission or not. Your body is registering the frequency boundary through sensations no diagnosis can explain. The part of you that needs explanations before it trusts what it is already experiencing, that part is the last to arrive. It does not need more data. It needs what every ancient tradition, every hermetic text, every frequency map preserved across 5,000 years was ultimately designed to provide. The recognition that what you are feeling is real, it has a structure, it has been documented by independent observers across the entire span of recorded human history, and it is not going to stop, because it is not a disruption. It is the signal that the calibration you were always designed for has finally begun. If you stayed until the end, write in the comments, "I recognize the shift. I have placed another lesson on your screen right now, your next step on this path." Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.